reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. He spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, smeared the clay on his eyes, and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." But others said, "No, he just looks like him." He said, "I am." They brought the one who was blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see." So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a sinful man do such signs?" There was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and are you trying to teach us?" Then they threw him out. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. He found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshipped him. Sisters and brothers, the gospel of the Lord. Do you have any blind spots? Areas in your life in which you know you're not living gospel values? Probably a trick question in a way. Because if it's a blind spot, how do you see? How do you know? That's the very nature of the sense of being blind, not even realizing it, as we see the Pharisees in the gospel there today. Remember, gosh, now, a few years back, a young woman at the university, this was several years ago, came to see me, and she was really upset. The situation was that in her, whatever, I don't know the course now, but whatever the course was, they must have had questions, multiple choice or something like that. But anyway, she was upset because in the course, in a test, she had allowed a couple of her friends to look on her paper because she was very bright and did very well. And so she let them see that. And what bothered her is the professor found out and gave her a 0 for the test. Now her complaint was, "Oh, okay, I shouldn't have done that, but I shouldn't have got a 0. I mean, this was a young woman who was used to getting A's and B's, and she said, "You know, simply because of that one test, I may get a C now. It's unfair what that teacher did." She hardly at all spoke about what she did as being wrong. After all, she was being a good friend. She was helping out some of her friends who maybe didn't have a chance to study or weren't as gifted and as bright as she was. And gosh, that was her mindset. And okay, it was just a little thing. It wasn't that big a deal. And yet, as we talked about it, and I just asked questions, kept trying to bring it back to her because she was upset about the teacher. And taking another look and seeing, because Scripture says this, even if it seems like a small matter, that was still wrong. And maybe her getting the 0 that really bothered her. I said, "Why don't you turn that around and be bothered in such a way that you think, you know what, I'll never do that again. There's consequences when I'm not doing that which is right." Maybe nobody would have found out. But one of the definitions of character is who we are when I had been involved with one time, a while back, he gave a talk. He was a young adult. And he was out there talking about his own life. And he talked about how when he was 18, and I think at this time he was like 20 or so, when he was 18, he was at the university, went up in Cleveland, and going to school and everything, still living at home. And his mother one time walked in on his room and saw him looking at pornography on the internet. And she got upset and said, "What are you doing?" And of course he tried to make up stories and stuff like that and get by, but she could clearly see that he just didn't do this, it just accidentally popped up. And she was critical of him. And as he's telling the story at the young adult retreat, he's mad at his mother. And he might have some degree of legitimacy. He said she went in and didn't knock, and that's his door, and he's 18 years old. On the other hand, the mom said, "Hey, as long as you're living in this house, you're not going to do that stuff either." And what she made him do, because he still was living at home, is take that computer out of his room and put it in the living room or dining room somewhere. She said, "It's going to be here," I don't know, he said like a month or two, and she said, "That's part of your consequences. Because you're not doing that here, we believe that is wrong. We don't want you to get caught up in that." And of course, for the longest time, he said he's just really mad at his mother. And his attitude is, "Hey, I'm 18, and I ought to be able to do what I want. I'm in college, and I don't need to have some mom, breathing down my neck, checking out on things." And so, the whole time, he was telling us, for the longest time, the whole focus was on his mom. And what kind of mother she was. And doing that in pride. But he said that after being out there and the consequences of a couple of months, and he said he still had to do his workout in the living room or dining room, wherever it was, he said he realized something. It took him a couple of months. Blind spot. He realized something. Because when he took his computer back in his room, he had broken the habit of going to pornography. And he said it was only then that he realized that he really got into a bad habit. And it was starting to get worse. And really, even though he was frustrated with what his mother did, that helped break the habit. Later on, with hindsight, he's grateful. Because he says, I didn't realize how bad it was getting. I was caught up in the pleasure of the moment. I was caught up in, I'm an adult and I should freely do what I want. But he was moving down an addictive path that obviously could have been enslaving of him, and unfortunately is enslaving a number of people who usually don't talk about it. Blind spots. Spots that we might rationalize. Ways any of us might come up with excuses for ourselves, put it over on somebody else. I mean, in the gospel, amazing. The Pharisees, these are the religious people, these are the faithful ones. These are the ones who try to be true to the faith and are real conscientious. And yet, here one more time, Jesus heals someone who's blind. And they get upset because he's doing it on the Sabbath. Because to them, you're not supposed to do any kind of work on the Sabbath, that's wrong. That was how they saw it, and they didn't see it any other way. And Jesus was trying to make the point, not only then, but on other occasions. Hey, if you can help somebody on the Sabbath, if you can reach out and love or heal somebody or body away for somebody on the Sabbath, that's a good thing. That's not breaking the Sabbath law. The Sabbath law is about unnecessary work. But the work of love is always God's work any day of the week. But did they get it? No. Over and over, he tried to help them to see. And maybe even deliberately. We may have talked about this before. You notice how many times he heals on the Sabbath. I think, why didn't he heal on Thursdays? Maybe he healed on the seventh a number of times to make the point. Because he knew they'd get upset. And try to help them see differently. Not be so rigid and legalistic and narrow about their faith where they let out compassion altogether. Blind spots. We all need to take a deeper look at ourselves. So often people can point out one another's blind spots, And I know this morning at Mass, I mentioned married couples or friends or so forth that they wanted to, you know, see if they wanted, as they left, point out blind spots. Well, sure enough, one young married couple outside said, "We're going to talk about our blind spots on the way home today. This should be very interesting." Because a lot of times other people can point them out for us. I gave a lot of credit. But again, there can be those areas we fail to see. Those areas that in this Lenten season, it calls us to conversion so we can see more clearly. Where we need to grow. Where we need to be more, to turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. The Ash Wednesday prayer. And I just want to look at this one reading here now from Ephesians. And go back to it just for a moment as we wrap up here. Paul's writing to the church in Ephesus. This is a church of Christians, a church of people who most recently had come to the Lord Jesus. And yet the reason Paul had to write all his letters to these various churches is they were still falling short. Understandably. We come to the Lord, but we still sin. And we keep coming back to the Lord. But Paul writes this: "Brothers and sisters, you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of the light. For light produces every kind of goodness and righteousness and truth. Try to learn what is pleasing to the Lord." For all of us, try to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. That may be something we can do to help us when we start to rationalize, when we fail to see maybe where we're falling short of gospel living and love. To use this kind of, okay, God, is this attitude, is this action, is what I'm thinking, or what I'm doing, or what I'm failing to do, is this pleasing to you or not? And it isn't just that it's pleasing to God and He doesn't want us to enjoy life. What's pleasing to God is what's in our best interest because He loves us. If it's not pleasing to God, if there's some sin to mention, it's because He sees that hurts us and one another and wants to forgive us and free us up. But to take a little more time, even right now, a moment, to look inside ourselves, attitudes, behaviors. Is there anything that maybe isn't pleasing to God that we need to say, Lord, forgive me, Lord, heal me, Lord, either help me get out of this,